Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. We're referring to this as the DIY indoor training hacks, making the indoor training experience more convenient, comfortable, and fun. So we're going to go down this list. This may or may not be one full continuous video. We may break this out into smaller segments. That remains to be seen at the end of the edit. We're going to talk about an introduction of who I am here in just a second. We're going to talk about the convenience and comfort factors that are critically important to having successful indoor training, stands and mounts, some other things that you may not have thought about when you're setting up your indoor training environment, rocker plates, what those are, design considerations, a whole slew of rocker plate resources, my own personal rocker plate design, the Arrowhead, and then we're going to follow up with you with questions. Well, here we go. My name's Coach Rob. I'm the owner and founder of Positive Performance Coaching. I also was the owner, and well, I should say founder of Cycling 360, the podcast, as well as the Endurance Quickcast, Bench Talk, and the Feed podcast. You can also find the Endurance Quickcast, the Feed, and Bench Talk podcast at positiveperformancecoaching.com/blogs. Or you can take a look at us at any one of your favorite podcasting services. I've been a coach for better than 13 years. I've been racing since 2006 on a number of disciplines, everything from time trialing, running 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathon, 10-mile distances, as well as duathlon and criterium and road racing, as you can see here. A lot of these pictures span most of my time racing, at least several of these in the last 5 years, but some of this goes back 10 years. Now, the coaching services that we offer at Positive Performance Coaching are for cyclists, runners, and multi-sport athletes. Think triathletes, duathletes, aquabike, aquathon. And we work with beginners to pros. There's been no shortage of that since the founding of this practice. We work with juniors all the way up to grandmasters. I will say this about juniors. There needs to be a pretty heavy emphasis on parental involvement for that to occur. So we don't coach a lot of juniors, but when we do, we take great pride in our work with our juniors. Strength and conditioning, sports psychology, and sports nutrition are all part of this practice. So a lot of people think that there's some sort of magic workout that gets you from where you are today to the podium. And that's not the case. There's a lot that has to go on to getting a competitive endurance athlete from where they are to the podium. If you'd like to learn more about the practice, please just visit. This is the simplest, fastest link, bit.ly/ppcstrong to learn more. Well, you can't really talk about indoor training without addressing convenience and comfort. We really want to design and organize everything for quick and easy use. We want to make sure that we've got a satisfying and enjoyable experience, and we want pleasant feelings with zero physical problems. So if we take a look at our little pictures here, we've got a very disorganized office, probably something that's been abandoned and caved in on itself. And then right next to it, we've got this really nice, clean, organized desktop. And at the bottom, we've got a cactus. I can only imagine trying to sit on something like that as far as a saddle goes, or putting on a rough old pair of tennis shoes to go running in. And then right next to it, you've got your little French bulldog who looks very comfortable on his pillow. Which one of those scenarios would you like to have happen? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in the first part of this webinar series, or not series, but this whole webinar, is understanding how to get you there, how to make this training environment a lot more convenient and comfortable for you. So one of the things that I found very early on, and I can't take total ownership of this, when we talk about stands and mounts and phone and tablet organization, depending on the software that you're using, as you can see on the iPad and the phone, we have Zwift. You're not necessarily, this whole webinar isn't just about one platform to your training on, whether you're a cyclist or a runner, but this mount came about because of Rainmaker at DC Rainmaker. This is a version of what he created years ago, and I've adapted. But I think that the big things that you have to think about when you're trying to manage your phone and your tablet as you're training, whether it's on a stationary bike, smart trainer, classic trainer, rollers, or even your treadmill. You've got to have a lot of adjustability. You've got to be able to reach it fairly quickly. There needs to be some stability in there, and you want some expandability in case you've got new gadgets or other, maybe a bike computer, or even a place to strap your Garmin watch to or your GPS watch to as you're training. Now, the mount that you just saw is made up of these components. On the far left, you have what is known affectionately as a microphone stand. Then there in the next picture, you have that little L-shaped bracket looking thing. That is what's known as a mic boom. And that helps to expand your use of that microphone stand. Then below that, you have a simple tray. You'll see a pair of car keys, a phone, and a cup. That little tray has proven to be a lot more helpful than I thought it would initially. It's not very large, but it's perfectly adapted to the microphone stand. And what I like about it is it's not so big that it will tip your device or your entire setup over. Then here in the middle, you have what looks to be like two different tablet mounts. They're the same mount. The difference is you're seeing it in a landscape versus portrait mode. And that mount, and you'll get a link to it here shortly, has proven to be incredibly helpful. And I'll talk about that again here in a second. Then lastly, you have a phone mount. This phone mount looks significantly like what I have now. It is a different model and a different manufacturer, but I have a sinking suspicion that they're borrowing from each other. They call this a bike mount. Quite honestly, I would never mount this to a bicycle or to a motorcycle for that matter, but it is fairly effective on the boom that you can attach to the top of a microphone mount that I showed earlier. These are all the links to every one of these items. I have experience with every one of these with the exception of that bike phone mount, and I can attest to all of them. They've all been fantastic. I would say too that one of the surprising things is that I used to have a really neat little fitting for my tripod for my phone to shoot videos or photographs from my phone, and it's no longer will work. It was called a glyph mount, and it won't work with the phone that I have today. But I've discovered that I could use the tablet mount to kind of hang my phone in suspension and be able to use it to shoot some of my videos recently. So that was a pleasant surprise. The mic stand boom may not be something that you want initially, but I think you'll want it later. So if you're trying to manage just an iPad or a tablet, a Samsung Galaxy, you're using it for maybe Zwift or another workout program, you're going to probably be okay with that initially. But eventually when you want to hang a phone off of this, maybe you've got another device. Some of the older smart trainers had their own computers involved, and you could mount that there as well. If you find, however, that any one of these mounts will not go around the boom mount, one of the things that we picked up on years ago, quite honestly, was a bit of a hack, is that we would wrap them in tape. I've used bicycle bar tape to make them thicker so that the mounts that go on that boom or on the mic stand itself have something that's a little thicker to tie into. Now, when we move on to stands and mounts, you can't get away from also thinking about displays or display management. And what you see here is exactly what I use. You see another shot of Zwift on a bigger screen. So you have a tripod, television mount, and a much, much larger tray. But the same thing holds true here. We're still concerned with adjustability, reachability, stability, and expandability. I would say this is that it's going to be kind of hard to expand a bit further on this, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. So what I ended up settling with and why I chose to have a much more portable solution for the monitor or television, if you like, and a tray, is that I already had a big screen, a relatively large screen television on the wall behind it, but my bike isn't pointed at that. And the way our room is set up, my wife's is and mine is not. I'm farther against the wall. The space may look relatively large, but it's not. It's a shotgun-shaped little office, and half of it's used for the bikes, and the other half is for recording, editing, work, coaching, what have you. But what I wanted to do is have it to where I had an adjustable mount for the monitor. And the reason being is that I'll do some of my work in a much higher position, upright position on a road bike, and some of the work I'll be doing laying across a time trial bike. So I needed that monitor to be able to raise and lower, whereas what you have fixed on a wall may not be able to get you there. There are certainly all types of things that you can do to make that happen when it comes to physical wall mounts on a television, but they get pretty pricey. This is much more portable. If we had a problem with that television, I could share this with my wife and it wouldn't be a problem as she's riding. So the actual mount, the tripod, it's from a company called Pyle, Pyle. If you've been an audiophile or know anything about audio equipment, they've been around for a while. These stands were initially created for small speakers, PA speakers, things like that. You know, if you've ever been to, a wedding and there was a reception and someone was a DJ, you might not be surprised to find out that that's what they were using to put their speakers on. So it holds a flat panel television roughly 32 inches is what they suggest, no greater than that. And that monitor, the one that I chose, was a TCL Roku 32 inch, and it just happens to be the cheapest one on the market. Plus, the TCL Roku has a VESA mount or a VESA compatible mounting system on the back of it. It's holes. And you need to make sure that the mount that or the monitor television that you purchase to use with this tripod stand is that it will support 75 by 75 or 100 by 100. That's the measure for the mount. Now the tripod itself comes with the panel to mount the television to and the actual screws, if I'm not mistaken, or they may have come with the TV, I forget. But either way, you should have the fasteners that you need. So why did I go with a Roku Smart TV? Two reasons. One, I'm a fan of Roku. I like the actual televisions. I have another one of these elsewhere in my home, and I've had it for over 2 years, and we've never had a lick of problems out of it. It's been fantastic. The other thing too is that there will come a point in the time where I don't want a Zwift. I want to just completely mindlessly tune out. I'll have a different app, maybe controlling my trainer, and I'm just going to tune out and I'm going to watch a movie. And that way I can do that. And I don't have to be distracted with Zwift. I have a different distraction. And the Roku allows you to do that. There's just thousands upon thousands of Roku channels that you can choose from. Some of them, of course, require subscriptions. Many of them do not. And then lastly, the tray for the flat panel monitor stand. It's the biggest one I could find. It's not the cheapest, but it is the biggest. And I really like it because I have put a laptop on it and I've been able to have the laptop connected to the monitor. I've used it for other things, other presentations, that sort of thing, and it has been fantastic. It's nowhere near of a concern of a tipping issue. While the Roku monitors were not expensive when I purchased mine, they still haven't come down in price because they're incredibly popular at that size. And but I will say that the tripod that I purchased, the Pyle, which any one of these links will take you to exactly those items on Amazon where I bought mine. They are the most affordable tripod mount for a television, but they do max out at 32 inches as their recommended size. Other stuff, things you might need to get started: sensors, power, bike, fans. So we're going to talk a lot here about all the other various things that you may have forgotten or hadn't thought about. Now, sensors. We're talking about the things that are going to go on your bike, maybe a laptop, and some things you may not have thought about. So we're going to start from the left and kind of work our way around, and I'll try to be as descriptive as possible here. But the first one that you'll notice here, it looks like a little thumb drive. It says A&T Plus on it. And what that is a USB dongle, is what we refer to that as, and it goes into a laptop. And those dongles are intended to help you or your laptop, whether it's Windows or a Mac, pick up an actual A&T Plus signal from your smart trainer and or any of the other devices you have on your bike, like a speed and cadence sensor that can only broadcast an A&T Plus. The other one would be a heart rate strap. Then, right next to it, which looks like a thumb drive, is actually a very, very nice Bluetooth. So if you have a device, a Windows laptop, Macintosh laptop, that doesn't support Bluetooth or Bluetooth is blown out in it for some reason, this is an alternative to doing that. I don't necessarily suggest doing that. If you've got a device that's having a problem electronically or doesn't even have a Bluetooth capability built into it, it's probably not going to work well with most modern applications, and you should seriously think about replacing those devices. Now, right next to that is a Scotchy speed and cadence sensor. Now, I really don't normally like to make recommendations of products that I've never used. I have used the Scotchy optical heart rate monitor, and I was incredibly impressed with it and insanely depressed when I lost mine. I misplaced it at a gym one day. I think it fell out of my gym bag. Then next at the bottom, that larger image, it says Viva 4i. That is the name of the company, is 4i. And Viva is a heart rate strap. But what's really cool about the Viva heart rate strap is that it is Bluetooth and ANT. It's what we call a bridge. And if you look to the far right, you notice this little pod looking thing. It says cable, and it has an ANT Plus and a Bluetooth logo. That's all that device is a bridge. It doesn't serve any other purpose than to convert an ANT Plus signal to Bluetooth and back. So that's what's really neat about those two devices. Now, the Viva heart rate strap, you got the bonus. It will measure heart rate and it acts as a bridge. So if you've got an older speed and cadence sensor on your bike and you need to be able to read that along with your newfangled heart rate strap that only works in Bluetooth, and maybe you're trying to broadcast that to an Android tablet, an iPhone, or an iPad as you're trying to connect to something like Zwift, that's how you do it. Also, if you're using something like Apple TV, which only has 2 Bluetooth channels, you're definitely going to need a bridge if you want more than just a couple of things available to you through Zwift on Apple TV. Once again, I have links to all of these things. I will once again say this. I don't have any prior experience with that speed and cadence sensor. You're more than welcome to try others. I do strongly suggest staying away from bridges. I do believe it adds a level of complexity that your average person just does not want to fight with. So unless you're completely married to your ANT, solution that you have built into your bike, or it's a really old smart trainer, I would stay away from those. The heart rate strap, the 4i Viva, I would also be remiss to say that I have had problems with that device. We purchased 2 of them, probably within about a week or 2 of each other. And initially I was having 0 issues with mine. And then all of a sudden it started eating batteries. I did reach out to customer service. They gave me a couple of suggestions. They seemed to work, and I really didn't have much luck after that. So to be perfectly blunt, if you work for 4i, I threw the thing in the trash. And customer service was definitely one of the reasons why I don't intend to go back. The other heart rate strap is working perfectly fine. It's the one that my wife uses, and she's been very happy with it. Me, on the other hand, I won't go back to that again. Now, when it comes to the Bluetooth USB dongle that I mentioned earlier, the one that looks like a thumb drive, there are others. That's just one that's a quick link that actually had some of the better reviews out on Amazon, so feel free to check it out yourself. The next one up is power or chargers and some side of video management. And on the far left is a ubiquitous surge strip. It's an APC. I don't use the APCs at home, but I have used them in a lot of office settings in the past when I was setting up people's offices. And I will tell you this, they are a fantastic product, and that's the one that I would recommend. Next to that, you have 2 different weird looking, well, let's just call them what they are. They're adapters. The first white one is a Lightning to HDMI adapter, and the next one is a USB-C to HDMI adapter. So if you're an iPhone user or an iPad user, most recent models as of the recording of this, you're going to want that first one for either your phone or for your tablet if you want to connect to a monitor. I don't recommend using solutions like Apple TV to AirPlay because the lag is horrible. And then on top of that, I don't care how strong your phone or your tablet is or how new of a version of Apple TV you have, there's going to be lag and you're going to have a bad experience and you're going to get frustrated. I promise you, I've already been down that road, and it's not one that I like. If I had to do it differently, I would go with an Apple TV 4K and forget the iPhone and just, use that on a big TV. I've had several athletes that I coach do just that. The next one, of course, is the USB-C. So any of the latest, greatest MacBooks, MacBook Air, MacBook Pro, you're going to be forced to use a USB-C dongle to go to HDMI if you want your laptop to go straight to a monitor. Now, these other two cables, you may not be as familiar with. Now, the bottom right-hand one is, think of it as a charging cord for your phone or your tablet, because you're going to need that if you're using one of these, because they have to have power. Otherwise, they'll drain your phone or your tablet faster than you can imagine. I'm also going to make one other note here. There are a number of these Lightning to HDMI adapters that are third-party. They're not Apple products. Usually some Chinese manufacturer that makes a claim that they're MFi certified. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. I have one, and it's been a mixed bag experience. I don't particularly care for it. It does get warm to the touch. I have another one that's an Apple product that's significantly more expensive, but I have zero power issues, zero issues with video quality, and I do intend to replace that one. And so if anybody wants it, let me know. Then on the right, like I said, is a USB to Lightning adapter or cable. You're going to want that to power the devices. Now above that is something that you may not be familiar with. That is what we would refer to as a USB extension cable. So you have the male fitting that would go into the laptop. In this particular case, it's a USB A or B, and then it's a 3.0 in this particular link I'm going to show you here in a second. But you'll notice at the other end, it's got a female end. And why would you need that? So if you're using an older trainer that will in a laptop and you want to broadcast ANT, one of the things that we discovered very early on with Zwift is proximity problems. If your ANT Plus dongle, the little USB piece that I showed you in the previous slide, is not close to your trainer, you're going to have things that drop out potentially. So we learned a long time ago we needed to run an extension cable from a laptop all the way back to the trainer with the little ANT Plus sensor back there, and that definitely solved the problem. So again, here are all the links to all of these things. You've got the Apple Lightning to digital AV adapter. These are certified Apple products. And then beneath that, you've got, it says USB 3.0 extension cord. That's one that we were just talking about. Now, I would say this. You can use USB 3.0, 2.0, and 1.0 on pretty much any USB port. If your USB ports on your laptop will support 3.0, certainly use an extension cord and plug setup that is set up for 3.0 USB. Lightning cord, it's hit or miss. I'm showing a generic one here. And I would say again with that, you are better served to go with an Apple-based product, but quite honestly, they don't make very long ones. They're hard to come by and they're super expensive. So I've settled on a couple of different off-brand, third-party things that are, you can go from 6 feet all the way up to 15 feet now, if I'm not mistaken, for these cords. And they're primarily meant for people who only have like a charging port at the front of their vehicle, and they're trying to get a cord all the way to the second or third row in their SUVs for their children or their guests in their vehicles. And then lastly, the surge strip. You can use any old surge strip that you want. I would suggest this, though. If you've got surge strips in your home that are starting to reach 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, you might want to seriously think about replacing them. Because even if the little fuse and the lights are still on, you just don't know what kind of abuse these things have taken over the years of storms and surges in your home. And do you really want to trust your super expensive treadmill and or bike trainer and or now smart bike to that kind of cheap insurance? You only pay $25, $35, $40 for a surge strip. And if you lose one of these devices, these expensive trainers or treadmills, to a surge because you had a bad surge strip, you're probably going to lose out on that when you try to go to warranty. Now the bike. This is something else that people don't think a whole lot about, and I'm going to cover a couple of myths here too, potentially. Cassettes, chains, quick releases, adapters, and tires. And we're going to start on the far left. Many of the direct drive smart trainers that are on the market don't come with a cassette. And even if they do, it might not be the right cassette for you. Now, I'm not going to have links to all of the cassettes out there. I will say this, that if you're a Shimano or a SRAM setup on your bike and you're going to be using a direct drive trainer, I strongly advise you to look at an Ultegra. I'm showing a 105 cassette here, but I do mean an Ultegra cassette. And I've also discovered that you might want to try, if you've got multiple bikes that you ride, you might want to try to standardize on the cassette. So if you want to switch your road bike, your time trial bike, or your gravel bike, or your mountain bike, that's where it becomes tricky. Because do you want to also have to change the cassette? In my particular case, I have a time trial bike and a road bike, and the difference between the setups is what, 2 teeth. So time trial bike is 11/28, road bike is 11/30. I don't notice a big difference, but then again, my road bike does not spend a lot of time on my smart trainer. Then the next thing we have is a trainer quick release. Now you'll look at that. That's not something that you would want on any of your nice fancy bikes because it's heavy. I mean, it is a monster compared to modern quick releases. And this is for a bike that is only going to be quick release mountable. If your bike has a through axle, whether it's mountain gravel or now road bike with disc brakes, you're going to have adapters. I don't have anything in here to give you a link to purchase adapters. Your smart trainer, if it is a direct drive wheel off trainer, should have shipped with a number of different adapters. So when you buy one, make sure that when you open up that box, you're looking through all the pieces and parts that it did ship with adapters. I think early on it was a problem, but now in the second and third generation and soon to be fourth generation of smart trainers, you should expect and anticipate that adapters would be included. Double check what comes in the box before you make your final purchase decision. Next thing you'll see is a chain. And I think one of those things that's important to remember is that you may not think you're doing as much indoors as maybe you would necessarily do outdoors, but the wear is still there. And if you want to maintain the life of your chain rings and your cassette, you're going to want to make sure that you have a chain that is easily taken off. And that's why I'm showing you one with a quick link. I believe that this is either a KMC or a Shimano, maybe 105 chain. I'm not sure. I think I've got it linked here in the next screen. But even so, whether you're a Shimano user or a SRAM user, you can use things like a KMC missing link to make it much easier to remove your chain. What I don't include in here is a chain removal tool. When you're using a quick link, it's like a set of pliers, and it allows you to pinch it together and open up that chain link. I really adore doing things this way. For me, it's super clean. It's very efficient. The moment that I've gone into 2 weeks of training indoors, at the very end of that week, that chain comes off. I clean it. I re-wax it. Yes, I go old school. I like waxing chains. And then I put it right back on the bike, and I make what I like to call trainer dandruff. I don't have any photos of that, but it puts lots of little paraffin wax all over my rocker plate. Now, above that is the infamous, legendary trainer tire. So if you're working with a wheel-on trainer, whether it's a classic trainer / dumb trainer or a new wheel-on smart trainer, you do not have to have a trainer tire. Repeat after me. They're not necessary. Why do they exist? I don't know. But here's my complete complaint about this. How many times have you had one and you go to take your beloved bike off the trainer and you want to go out and ride? You want to go outside. Have you ever tried riding outdoors with one of these things? They're not meant for outdoor use. They're horrendous. They're hard. They're slick. You're much more likely to go out in a corner, stack your bike because of those tires. They are not intended for outdoor use, only indoor use. So let me give you a tip. You're eventually going to have a flat tire. I don't care. It's not a matter of when, it's a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And what I always do is that when I buy new tires for my bike, I buy 3 tires. I buy 3, because I am going to wear out the rear one. I will from time to time rotate the front to the rear, especially if I think that it really doesn't look like it's seen a lot of use. And then I'll put the new one on the front. When the other one wears out, the rear wears out, or I get a flat. Now, when that's all done and said with, what happens is for the new year is I'm always going to have at least one of these front tires left over, and it's going to have very little mileage on it. That's what goes on my rear wheel. So if I decide that I want to take my bike out of the trainer, go outdoors and ride, I don't have that horrendous looking and performing trainer tire on my bike. They're not necessary. However, if you're going to have a bike set up on a trainer, a wheel on trainer, and that's its entire job for the rest of its life is to sit there, then I would suggest that that might not be such a bad idea. So as you see here, I don't have links to tires or axle adapters. As I said, you can get those. The axle adapter should come with your direct drive trainer. The tires, I'm going to leaving that one up to you on making the final decision, but I strongly advise that you don't spend the extra money on something that's going to become more of a hassle. Trainer quick releases, they should also come with your direct drive trainers because you still need them. But with some of these new smart wheel-on trainers, there have been some cases I've been told by athletes that I coach that theirs didn't come with one. And so you probably have one laying around, but just in case, it's not a bad idea to have an extra one. They seem to go walkabout every now and then. The next time you can't find it when you need it. Chains, same thing. Back chains and cassettes. These links are for Shimano products, which will work for Shimano and SRAM, maybe FSA. Don't hold me to that, but definitely will not work with Campy or Campanolo. And if you have a Campanolo setup, be careful because you want to make sure that when you're purchasing a direct drive trainer that it has a free hub or at least a spare free hub that will accept a Campanolo cassette. This is probably one of the biggest takeaways from comfort. Maybe not convenience, but definitely comfort, and that is fans. I can't say enough about moving air around you, whether you're on a treadmill, a trainer, or you're in your at-home gym lifting weights, because if there's sweat on the ground, that is power lost. And what you're seeing here is some fans, some cooling solutions, and what I like to call power absorption. On your far left is a brand that I'm very familiar with. I have a couple of their devices. It's not that one exactly. That's their medium size. I have the smaller version. It's a Vornado small. I have two of those. They're the smallest units. They're very compact. They're easy to point and rotate so that I can get the air exactly where I want them. And you'll see in a picture in a little bit. Then right next to that is what I would like to replace one of my moderately sized fans with. It's known as an air mover. These are actually used by people who do a lot of carpet cleaning or if they're trying to repair a home from, let's say, flood damage and they're trying to dry a house out. They move a lot of air in a very compact form factor. As a matter of fact, some of these can actually be daisy chained together to push out even more air. The one that I have listed here is not one that I have any experience with whatsoever. I will say that. It is highly recommended, and it has one of the best price points of all the air movers on Amazon. The next thing that you see here is just a big pile of plush terry cloth towels in a very specific color, black. Why is it that it's black? Well, that's easy. My wife made it very clear to me that she did not want my sweaty towels getting confused with all of the normal bath towels. So I bought a stack of black terry cloth bath towels and a stack of black terry cloth hand towels. The bath towels I use, quite honestly, when I'm in the sauna, and the hand towels are what I drape across my bike so that I don't sweat all over the front hub of my beautiful time trial bike or my road bike when it's fixed on the Smart Trainer. I also use them to wipe down if I do build up some sweat. The last one you see here is a very tall pedestal fan. It is height adjustable. It's also a 3-speed fan with a remote control, which I love. That one is set up directly behind me in my training scenario, which you'll see pictures of shortly. And what I like about it is that I can point it and kind of lean it at me So it's hitting my back, which is really a big chunk of real estate to cool. And so between it and all the other fans that I set up, I whether that I'm racing in Zwift or I'm doing a really hard workout in Zwift, I have yet to have a big problem with big pools of sweat like I used to. So other things to take into consideration too here that weren't mentioned or shown in those photographs: headbands, wristbands, or sweatbands if you like. A friend of mine years ago came to a ride. He was wearing a sweatband and he had them on his wrists as well. And I thought, wow, I haven't seen those since the 80s. And he was on to something. I have found that when the fans don't cut it, one of the worst things I'm fighting with, especially in a Zwift race, is sweat running into my eyes. So having a headband on while I look like I'm coming from an old 1980s jazzercise video, it works. And forget the fashion faux pas I'm making. I would rather have something work than not work. I also have a list or a link to some hand towels and the bath towels. And the air mover, like I said, I don't have any experience with, but I think you're going to find that that might be a nice added item. I know it's something that's in my wish list and I hope to get here in the next couple of months. Okay, so now we've moved on to rocker plates and trainers that provide motion. And we're going to talk about what's out there in the real world that already exists. We'll get into the whole DIY aspect in a moment, but I would be remiss not to share with you what is already out there. In the top left-hand corner is a trainer that really showed a lot of promise from a company that is no longer focused on hardware, and that's the company called Be Cool. They have completely shifted their focus from hardware to software in an effort to compete with the likes of Zwift and Ruvi. So that device actually will sway from side to side. I've never used one. I've never even seen one in the wild, but I have heard pretty nice descriptions that it's a very fluid motion. Then right next to it at the top is a set of real motion rollers. So not only do you have the beauty and simplicity of rollers where you're not connected, you're not in a static fixed position, you get to go side to side, they actually move fore and aft with you, making it significantly easier to stand or shift in the saddle without feeling like you're going to come off the rollers. Then on the far right, we have the granddaddy, and that is the Kurt Kinetic Rock and Roll Trainer. It was one of the very first trainers, to my knowledge, on the market to provide some kind of side-to-side motion. However, I did try those on a couple of occasions, once in a bike shop, once at a buddy's house, and I never could get it to feel natural to me. None of these are ever going to be perfect. None of them are ever going to give you 100% natural feeling, but that is the kind of the forefather of what we're talking about. Then at the bottom middle, you have what is really new and coming onto the scene, for all intents and purposes, is a bike treadmill. Some of these will actually raise and lower to show that you're climbing or you're descending. And I got to tell you, I would really love to try one of these days, but they're super, super expensive. But there's more and more of them coming out. Then the bottom left-hand corner and just above it, you have modern rocker plates. The bottom one is the one from Ceres. Its name is so long I can't even begin to tell you. It's a bunch of numbers, and it's a big disappointment. I'm just going to come out and say it. The prototype unit that they were showing around was the one that I thought that I would end up with. And for whatever reason, cost, what have you, they chose not to actually ship their original prototype. They came up with something, quite honestly, that looks like something that I could make in my garage, with exceptions. And that is that when you do get to look underneath that wooden plate, you start to realize that there's a lot more engineering going on that meets the eye. Now, the price has come down a bit on it, but it is incredibly expensive. I mean, almost 10 times the cost of a DIY solution. And that's what you see right above it. That's a really simple, it's probably the most simple rocker plate you can build. And in this example, it's with a Wahoo Kicker direct drive trainer. Now, the one that I built doesn't look anything like that, but it's similar in how it's engineered. So let's go ahead and talk about rocker plate DIY. Why do you want to DIY? In my case, it's because I could. I had two reasons. I could do it, got the tools, and I was getting ready to do a big basement finishing project, and I thought, you know what, let's knock the rust off of my skill set with all my power tools, and let's work on something simple like this rocker plate before I tear into my basement. What does a rocker plate do? Okay, a rocker plate is just there to provide comfort. It is there so that you can have some side to side, and depending on the design, maybe some or significant amounts of fore and aft movement as well. Is it going to make you faster in and of itself? No, it's like a power meter. Power meters measure things. They don't actually provide you with anything but data. Rocker plates are similar. They're not in itself going to make you faster, stronger, fitter, but it will allow you to be more comfortable and allow you to feel more comfortable spending more time on the trainer, which in that case will make you stronger, fatter, faster, and fitter. Does it really help? Yes, I've had my rocker plate in place since the latter part of 2019. It's now the spring of 2020, and I've had multiple 3 hour plus rides. I have yet to do a century yet on it. I do intend to have one probably in the next week or two, and that one was going to require some getting up and getting off the bike a couple of times. I am positive. I just don't think I can do more than 3.5 hours, even with the rocker plate. Sometimes that just has to do with saddle as well as the bibs or shorts that you're wearing or the chamois. But it really has helped me. I have spent significantly more time comfortably training than I ever have before. Would I do anything differently? Yes. The probably the biggest specific things that I would change in my design, which we'll see shortly, is the materials. One of them was is that I had some MDF, medium density fiberboard, 3/4 inch thick, laying around, and I didn't want to keep holding on to it because a 4x8 sheet of 3/4 inch MDF is pretty heavy. If you've never had to lift it, it weighs a lot. It takes two people, at least in my house, to handle it. And that the other problem with it is that it when you cut it and try to sand on it, it's going to make a ton of dust because that's all MDF is compressed sawdust. Are you happy with the design you chose? Yes and no. Once again, I like the overall shape. It's a full length one. We're going to see photos of it shortly. I do like the length of it. I do like the construction method of it, except for the aforementioned MDF, and I would have gone with plywood instead. But the other thing that was a bit disappointing was in the design that I chose with the rubber isolator mounts is I'm not getting near the amount of fore and aft motion that I had been told that I was going to get with this design. Would I recommend build over buy? Now, this is an interesting question that I get asked frequently in my day job as an IT consultant. Should I buy or should I build? Well, I would have to say when we're talking about a rocker plate, you're going to have to gauge a few things. What are your DIY experiences? Do you have the necessary tools, which we're going to talk about? Do you have the necessary skills with those tools? Do they make you fearful? Are you nervous using a power saw or a drill? Do you have the necessary time? Do you have the space to make the kind of sawdust I was talking about earlier? Those are all things that you have to decide. I can't tell you that. If your time is very valuable and you don't have the time to fool with this, then by all means buy. And you don't have to buy the Ceres. There's others like the SBR rocker plate. You can even get it as a kit where the plate itself is already pre-cut, already painted. All you have to do is get it home and assemble it if all you want to work is with hand tools. How long did it take me to build? Well, that's a different story altogether because I think if I would be perfectly honest, it was probably about a week, but in all reality, it was about 2 days worth of time. And I'm not talking about 24 hours, I'm talking 6, 8 hours. And the reason why I'm having to be honest here is I had a kind of a fit and start because I was missing some fasteners and I had to go back to the hardware store a couple of times. And was it expensive to build? No, I said I can't account for the cost of the board that I had. It was already on hand, but I'm definitely under $200 in material cost. So that's significantly cheaper than the Ceres piece that's like almost $1,000 or a little over $1,000 depending on who you buy it from. The SBR rocker plate, if you buy it already pre-assembled, I believe ships for $400 to $500, maybe $600. And I think their kit starts at $250, $300. And then what all did I have to buy? So let's go ahead and jump right in and let's start looking at all that stuff here in just a minute. So this is it. This is my setup. Everything that we've talked about to this point is here with the exception of the materials involved in building the rocker plate. But I want to walk you through it. On the left, you've got a vertical kind of look at my layout here. And you probably are witnessing a couple of things and going, what on earth am I looking at? So you've got the Elite Drivo first gen smart direct drive trainer sitting on the back of the rocker plate. It is a full length rocker plate that I've affectionately labeled the Arrowhead. It's not a design that I've created, out of from scratch. This is, as you can see here, there's a link at the very top of the page that says Rocker Plate DIY resources. Go to that one, that bit.ly link, and it says PPC underscore ROCKRPLATE. That does not take you to my website. As a matter of fact, that takes you to the Zwift the Zwift Rocker Plate Facebook group, and there you're going to get a ton of help. They actually, in their folder, I don't know if you know that Facebook groups do have folders. You're going to find a slew of different designs to choose from. This one is one that I adapted based on the materials that I had and my trainer. So I can't tell you exactly what's going to work for your trainer because I've only built one of these and it was specifically for the Elite Drivo. And one of the things that you're going to see in this picture that looks a little odd is sitting right next to the side of, in the second picture, is a stack of free weights. Well, why did I do that? You may discover that in your own design that if you've got a direct drive trainer and it's got a sizable freewheel on it, that's a weighted freewheel. With the exception of the TACX Neo, all of them have a weighted freewheel. So your trainer may feel lopsided until you put a counterweight on it. All right, so before we go any further, let's talk a little bit about the fan position here. In the left photo, you'll notice that there's that tall pedestal fan I was talking about pointing at my back. And then on the right picture, you'll notice a couple of those little Vornado fans that I talked about at the bottom. What they're doing is one is facing towards my chest and the other one is closer to my face, blowing upward as I'm laying across that time trial bike. You may also see in the left photo, all the way in the distance up against the far wall is a small, what we're all, I guess, a small pedestal fan. That's the weak link in this setup. It doesn't move a lot of air. I think, if anything, it's causing some problems, and that's the one I would like to replace. And that larger screen TV in the background is the one that my wife's bike is pointing to that you can't see in this picture. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward. Oh, one more thing. In the left photo, you might notice that there's something underneath the power cord just behind that trainer. That is a torpedo level. I use that to kind of judge the air in those little playground balls we're going to talk about next. So here's the building materials. On the left, you'll see most of the bits and pieces. So you've got a series of fasteners, washers, and then on the below that, you've got 2 playground balls. There was actually a total of 4 that were used. I'll get into that also a little bit further on. Then you see a little hand pump for those playground balls. And then you'll see the rubber isolators. These isolators, I wish I had chosen different ones. It's a male-female setup. I wish I had gotten female-female, mainly because it would have made for a much more attractive final design than what I ended up with. And I might be able to show you what I mean by that. But if I had used a female-female isolator, the black fasteners at the top, these kind of flush mount M5 head threaded, fine threaded fasteners would have countersunk to the top of the deck of my rocker plate instead of the bolts and washers that I had to use, or the nuts and washers I had to use for the male fitting. The other thing that you'll see here is a couple of like little rubber straps I use as isolation mounts again underneath those what you might refer to as C-clamps, but they're actually pipe clamps down there at the bottom, and that was for holding the trainer. So you'll also see that on the plate next to it, or the picture to the next side, that is the full sheet of 4x8 that I started with. So building materials, I'm not going to give you a link necessarily to a 4x8 sheet, 3/4 inch of MDF. I would, once again, the asterisk is there to remind you, don't get MDF. Use a normal plywood. You don't have to get anything super expensive, but it depends on how you want to finish it. There's been some really beautiful ones done where they've used oak veneer or maybe a maple, or I've even seen some walnut veneered plywoods that were used where they got stained and they look like furniture when they're done with them. Fasteners, that's also going to be up to you depending on the isolation mounts that you buy. Truck bed coating. Now, the one that's listed here, the link that I've given you, is for Rust-Oleum truck bed liner, and you'll see in some pictures later that I had Duplicolor. The Rust-Oleum is just as good, but it's cheaper. The difference is that I was able to get my hands on the Duplicolor truck bed liner coating faster. The isolators, this link is for the female isolator, not the ones that's in the photograph. I don't want anyone to have to deal with that like I did. Then finally, 5-inch playground balls. Why do we have 5-inch playground balls? Well, those, you've got the isolator mounts, and without the playground balls, the side-to-side rocking motion of this would be super unstable. And so think of them as air springs. That's what we use those for. Now, this is tools. Everything that you see here, with maybe the exception of a corded drill and maybe a couple of other items, is what was used. I've got a small putty knife and a little bit of wood putty where I made a mistake and had to fill in a cut that I made. I've got a rasp for some sanding. I have an air impact driver. You don't have to have that, but it certainly came in handy during assembly and taking things apart. Tape measure, various drill bits, definitely a 4-inch hole saw, Allen key for some of the fasteners that I used, some wrenches that I needed for some of the other fasteners. Then there's a cordless drill. You can also use a corded drill if you have that. I have a very old Black & Decker jigsaw that my father gave me years ago that you will never find. They don't make them anymore, but I have a link to one that I would rather have from Porter Cable. Then there's a hammer, just one that I had laying around, probably not the right one, but I needed it to tap fasteners in. Then you've got a very long framer's level. Then beneath that you have a framer's square. And actually that's one used for drywall, but it became very handy because of its length when I was trying to lay out the pattern for what I wanted to cut. Which brings you to the circular saw. The circular saw just has a really inexpensive old school Porter Cable circular saw, corded, and then right next to it is a palm sander, and that made fast work of smoothing over edges, because you don't want sharp edges, you want nice rounded edges when your final piece is done. Then you've got a broom and a dustpan. If you're working with MDF, you're going to need that, and probably a shop vac and a very patient wife if you've got to clean up in your house. It's bad. So here's a link to everything. The drill, if you want a new drill, this is a Porter Cable drill. Same with the circular saw and the jigsaw. All of those are going to be Porter Cable products. I've had a lot of luck with Porter Cable and Bosch. One of those might be a Bosch. And then on the other side, the 4-inch carbide hole saw, I think it's actually a hair larger than 4 inches. That's fine. I believe it's a Spider carbide, and it really makes fast work of this. So if you're going to build one of these for yourself, and you've got a spouse or a friend or a girlfriend at home, roommate, and they want one too, you're probably going to like the fact that you have that so that you can build a few more of these, because it's fun. Once you build one, you're going to probably want to build another one. The impact wrench, or impact gun, if you like, is a powered gun. The one that's in there is a Bosch that I bought. I needed it for a number of projects that I was working on around the home and also in my garage. So one of the comments that was left behind is that it is a bit weak. It's the most inexpensive one I could find at the time. They do make some that are a bit more powerful, and I kind of wish I had done that, but it's worked so far. You're also going to need impact sockets and bits and drivers specifically for an impact wrench. The bits and drivers you don't necessarily have to have. You can always use your regular corded or your cordless drill to drill holes, but the impact wrench might make faster work of it. Now what you see here is the first steps to my design. I took the trainer and I mounted my bike to it with the actual race wheel that I normally race with. I do not train with that wheel on that bike. It's just too expensive to do something silly like that. But it gave me some perspective because that's what was on the bike at the time, and kind of helped me set up the layout. As you see here on the right, you'll notice that there's two designs, and I'm really doing my level best to use every bit of real estate that I have available to me on that 4x8 sheet. And I think it comes across pretty well here. You'll notice there's a tape measure, So that remark should not go unheeded, and that is measure 5,000 times and cut once. So make sure you're okay with everything. I put my bike on both sections 3, 4, 5 times, making sure that I got everything set up the way I wanted. Now, you'll also see a small can of green spray paint there. That was just used as a reference. I used it to mark my corners so that I could get a nice rounded corner. And that free weight was used for the front. So once again, that I had a nice rounded front on my rocker plates. And here's another picture of that so that you can get a better idea of what I'm talking about. On the left, it's the front, the point of the arrowhead, and then on the back or the next photo, it's just a back corner, and the jigsaw is what was used to cut those. Here it is cut out, and you'll notice that on the left that I've got both boards stacked on top of one another, and they are sitting on top of paint cans so that I can get some space between them and the floor. You might already notice that I've marked a center line, and what that was is so that I could measure equal distance for the 5 isolator mounts, because I had to drill through both boards in the exact same space across that length so that I could have equal distance between the isolators. Then on the right picture, you'll notice all the sawdust. Let me tell you, that does not do that mess justice. It was horrible. I had to leave the room for a bit and let the dust settle so I could come back down. Even with a dust mask, it was miserable in there. You'll notice too that they're not exactly laying on top of one another, just to give you a perspective that that there were 2 boards laying on top of one another. Now, in this next series, we're starting to look at some of the assembly. On the left-hand side, remember, we've got 2 boards on top of one another, and I drilled holes. Used my cordless drill, my old Porter cable cordless, to drill those holes, and then you'll see here that I've got the isolator mount, one of them in with the female end up. And what's happened here is that since I've drilled those holes through both boards, when I go to assemble this, there won't be any guessing where things are supposed to go. Now on the right side is that clamp that I was telling you about, and you'll see here that it's there to hold the trainer down onto the rocker plate. You got to take that seriously. Somehow, some way, you've got to figure out how to affix your trainer to the rocker plate. You don't want it sliding. You don't want it slipping. Mine is very well secured. What's not shown here is there were a number of fasteners that I finally settled on. Not the ones that you see there in the photograph. I apologize for that. I'm not even sure why I've got drywall screws on here. But I did use probably some stainless steel bolts or some zinc plated bolts, and we'll talk about plating here in a little bit. Next, what you'll see here is that I have the trainer up on what looks to be the finished product. I was checking out on the left-hand side, I was looking for measurements for the holes, for the playground balls, for the air springs, if you like. So I already made all of my holes for the isolator mounts. Now I needed to figure out exactly where the holes were going to go for those playground balls, the air springs. So on the picture on the right, you'll see my cordless drill with that gigantic 4-inch hole saw on it. I've got a number of hole saws, but that's the biggest one I've ever had. And let me tell you, it ripped right through that board, no problems. And I went through both at the same time. So I cut through the first one and the second one, and it ripped right through it without an issue. Remember, it's a Spider carbide 4-inch hole saw. That is what was recommended in the group, and I thank them greatly for it. Next thing you'll see on the left is I started to assemble things. I put in the female side of the isolator mounts first, and now you can see the male end sticking up. And then you'll notice in the far right picture that both boards look a little bit different from each other. You'll notice that the board on the left in that far right photo has 4 fasteners sticking up. That is for the mount for the trainer to hold it and fasten it down. And you'll notice that there's 2 holes on both of those. They're in the exact same spot on both boards for our air springs. Now you start to see everything coming together. You'll notice that the actual rocker plate has been assembled. And you'll notice here that there are washers and nuts sticking above the surface of the rocker plate. This is the top here in your left-hand photo. The problem with that is that's because that the isolator mounts that I bought had bolts sticking out of them, and that can't go down on the bottom. So the female fitting and those really nice recessed hex screw or hex-headed M5 bolts that are recessed is what is on the bottom. I don't believe I have a photograph of that in this setup. I apologize. On the right hand shows where I started to figure out how to mount the trainer directly to the top of the rocker plate. That little black strip that you see next to that clamp, that is just a piece of, I believe, some rubber tire or maybe even some foam I had laying around that I cut to fit that. So is that I'm not going to be scratching or scraping the nice expensive trainer, and it was also help with vibration. Now, here's the funny thing. The photograph on the left, you'll see where I've got the bike 100% mounted. I got on the bike. You'll see that there's one counterweight, and I immediately said, that's not enough. So the counterweight wasn't enough, and having only 2 air springs was not going to be enough. Most people said that it wouldn't, but I wanted to try. And on the right, you see, I have completely torn the whole thing back apart, and I have done what? I've added more holes for an additional set of those 5-inch playground balls as our new air springs. That did the trick. That finally got it to where things weren't so crazy. Now, we're quickly approaching our finishing point with this. On the left, you'll see that hand tool that I mentioned earlier. It's called a rasp. It's a really coarse-grained file, if you like. And in this particular one, it's rounded on the back side and flat on the other. And I used that to soften the edges on the holes for the playground balls. Because if those edges aren't soft, they're eventually going to cut into the playground balls. And we'll talk about that in a little bit too. On the right-hand side, I'm just giving you a picture of scrap. Like I said, I worked really, really hard not to have anything left over. Some of this I could reuse, most of it I couldn't, and had to be, ended up landfill, unfortunately. And that little plastic bag, that was just the start of all the dust that I swept up, and that is a traditional American plastic grocery bag that, thank goodness, we're all starting to do away with. Now, this is all of the fasteners. And remember I said I was going to talk about plating. If you're smart, what you'll do is you'll try to get all of the hardware in stainless steel. I couldn't find everything that I needed in stainless steel. I will tell you this, stainless steel will rust, but what I chose to go with was a mix of stainless steel, and a lot of this is zinc plated. So to try to take care of any rusting issues, what I did is I just took a box that I had laying around, and I took it outside, and I coated both sides of these fasteners with just a very simple satin black that I happened to have. I did not need to purchase that for this project. Here's the fun part and the smelly part. This part was not done in my home. It was done in my outdoor shop, and I would have normally done this project outdoors, but it happened to have been very cool, very cold when I started this project. I got very lucky that we had a couple of very warm days and I didn't have to invest in any kind of special heaters. So what you see on the left is one of the rocker plates. I believe this is probably the top plate. Yes, it is the top plate. And what you've got going on here is a roller. And when you're picking your roller, if you're going to use a truck bed coating, whether it's Duplicolor or Rust-Oleum, you're going to have to remember it's an epoxy coating. The smell is incredibly strong. So you don't want to do this inside your home. You want to make sure you can do it on a day that's about 50 degrees Fahrenheit or warmer for at least 2 days consecutively so that this stuff can dry thoroughly. And remember, you want to coat the edges and both sides. Now, I don't have a, kind of a flipped version of this. That might actually be what the next image is. But one of the takeaways is that when I was putting this stuff on to the rocker plate itself and rolling it out, what I did was I didn't really let the first coat dry. It was still really tacky. And as an experiment on the underside to see if I was going to like it or not, I put more on there. And because it was so tacky, the texture was even more exaggerated, which I really like. It's a kind of an anti-slip. So when you're trying to get on and off your bike on a rocker plate, it's going to lean. So having that anti-slip coating there is going to be very helpful so that you don't try to, you're not going to break your neck when you're trying to unclip from your bike and get off the bike in the rocker plate. So there we go. That's it in a nutshell. Like I said before at the beginning, I'm not going to show you every step of the way of how to design your own rocker plate. This was my experiment. I've been very happy with it to date. I do have maybe one complaint, and the playground balls that are being used, if you look at the far right picture, you look at the yellow one in the back, it's pretty squished, isn't it? Uh, I've had one of these fail. The balls on the far left, closest to the wall, I don't know what's going on there, but one of them was really pushing through the hole, and I tried to back out some of the air pressure, and it worked. And later in that ride, it exploded. Oh man, people all over the house were going, "What's going on?" My wife thought I'd blown up something, and and I had spares. So when I bought mine, it came with 6, and I needed 4. So I've got one left over in case this happens again. But I would probably think about buying a different brand. I did have a link to a different brand in that list. And then if you take a look here, you'll see kind of my setup with the iPad mount there in the far right. You can see it there up against the wall. That's where I use the companion app on Zwift, and sometimes I'll use it to also manage my music selection because I don't listen to the background noise in Zwift very often. It's typically just me using the companion app, and then maybe stream something from Amazon Music or from my own private collection. And then of course you've got that 32-inch Roku TV. I apologize for all the corded mess behind it. That's something that's on my list to do next, is to get a bunch of zip ties and tie all that stuff up so that it's a little bit neater over there. That's something else I didn't mention that can be very helpful, is zip ties. As a matter of fact, the only 2 mounting points that I really had available to me for my trainer was that long, if you're looking at the far right picture, you'll see that long black bar right behind the bottom bracket and the cranks there. That's the bar for the front of the trainer. The back of the trainer only has one mounting spot, and it's that little white leg that sticks out close to those free weights that I have as the counterbalance. The problem with that one is that it's kind of at a slope, and I did create holes in the top of the rocker plate to use really heavy zip ties. And I tried putting in 2 zip ties, and you might kind of see it in that far right photo. One of them's drooping off the edge, and that's because the edge is sloped. But the back one's held on pretty good, and I may have to replace it in the future if it kind of wears. But that's pretty inexpensive to do. So, as always, if you've got questions, you can leave them here on the YouTube channel, or you can get in touch with us at positiveperformancecoaching.com and leave us a message there in our comments there, or excuse me, in our contact us page. As usual, if you need anything else, don't hesitate. Leave messages, leave comments, and we'd love to hear from you. And if you like this content, or there's something else that you want clarification on, or you think you would benefit from understanding with this setup, I don't have a problem with coming back and possibly creating additional content. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your training week.